Welcome everyone, and a special welcome to Ian Maguire, who is COVID positive and is joining us by the telephone link. I'm Councillor Hugh Mason, Cabinet Member for Planning Policy and City Development. This meeting is being webcast to allow the public to attend if they wish. Please be advised that the public meeting area is not in view of the camera. Well, I don't think that matters very much this morning. Usual housekeeping: if there's a fire alarm, don't use the lifts, and we meet by Queen Victoria's statue. If you have signed in, please remember to sign out. Please remember that you're being webcast. Anyone can record this meeting. And please remember to use the microphones. First of all, the only apology for absence is from Mr. Ian Maguire due to COVID-19. Do members have any interest to declare?
No.
No interest.
Good. In which case, we come on to the meeting. I will introduce very briefly the subject for today, and then we can open this for questions to Mr. Maguire.
Chair, do we need to introduce ourselves so they know who's here?
Okay, right.
I'm Councillor Judith Smythe of St Jude Ward.
Councillor Ryan Brent, Drayton and Farlington Ward.
Right. No, once again, St Jude's Ward, you and I, we produce the heavyweights here.
Certainly we do, Councillor.
Okay. The rationale behind the item which you have before you this morning is two things which have come up in the Building Control Partnership. As you know, we have a Building Control Partnership with Gosport and with Fareham, and it is one of those things which we run as a joint operation. There have been two problems, one of which is that we have been building up surpluses for the work which we do, the 80% of the work which we do, which brings in money. These surpluses have now reached £332,000, and this risks a challenge that we are using this to cross-subsidise other service areas. We're not using it properly, because the building regulations stipulate that fees should only be used to cover expenses or investment. The second issue is that for the 20% of work which is non-fee earning, we have a very cumbersome set of charging arrangements based upon timesheets. And this covers the non-fee earning work, and it has actually produced an inequality and certainly an inequity between the three councils that has been raised over the last few months. And so what is needed is a change in the financial system so that we do not make surpluses, although holding a certain amount of money in reserve in case of a downturn in business, and also that we introduce a system which is less cumbersome than that based upon timesheets. And it is that which is the substance of this morning's meeting. Okay. Questions from members, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions. I've got no problems at all with the basic premise of why we're doing this, and I understand that. However, I think there are a few confusions in this document that lead us to, that would be difficult for other people to interpret. And I'll just run through those, maybe three or four, and then ask Mr. Maguire to comment. So first of all, the question of on page 1, it's dated the 2021. It should be 2022, I would imagine. The new arrangement states that the reserve will be distributed back into the partner authorities. And I still don't quite understand how that mechanism works without it being used for other, for investment other than in the service. And I don't think that is quite explained here. Maybe that's the intention. So that's those are the first 2 points. The second, the third one to make, so Ian has 3. I'm not sure why we in Portsmouth retain road naming and numbering and access office for people who rely on wheelchairs and other forms of access, and the energy rating service. And it's not clear from the document how that reflects different charging arrangements within the financial arrangement, or at least it wasn't clear to me.
Thank you, Councillor Smythe. Mr. Maguire, can you address those 3 questions for us?
Certainly I can try. I do apologise that the sound quality is atrocious. I can barely hear you, but I believe the first question was just seeking some clarification and reassurance that the new nil surplus model isn't in breach of the controlling regulations that require that we're not cross-subsidising other services. Is that a fair summary?
Yes.
Okay. So in short principle, the key issue is that currently there's a number of different ways that the 3 authorities support the partnership to ensure that we are funding the non-fee earning work. One such way is through a series of recharges for different services we provide to the partnership. The other is direct payments on an annual basis. They invoice us for a proportion of their non-fee earning costs. Finally, there is a method of us providing the necessary costs of investment and service improvements, which obviously every service needs to keep the lights on, so to speak. This new model ensures that all of the things that can be paid for by the partnership, i.e. out of the surplus, as investments and service improvements in principle, are properly managed within that surplus area. So that £330,000 reserve is effectively worked down, not below a minimum safe level, below the 150,000 minimum downturn reserve level, but those monies are used first and foremost, rather than the partnership having to come cap in hand, so to speak, on a regular basis to the supporting authorities. This means that our payments to the partnership are limited only to a practical minimum we need to spend on the non-fee earning work. Hopefully that makes sense and answers the question.
To an extent. It may emerge later on, but I think, yes, I understand that. Thank you.
If I may move to the next question, I believe the next question was whether we're paying for naming and numbering services, or indeed how those services we're paying for are properly proportioned. Is that a fair summary of the question?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. So we're not paying for naming and numbering services because they don't do naming and numbering services for Portsmouth City Council. The way the contribution to non-fee earning work is carried out is through a simplification. So it is a pragmatic solution because the previous approach of timesheeting on individual tasks, as paragraph 4.6 details, was frankly costing us more time in producing the timesheets than it was saving us to understand the outputs. The non-fee earning recharge, then, the amount we pay into the partnership, is effectively calculated as by using the reasonable proxy of our fee earning activity. If we're going to do 60% of the work of the partnership in Fareham, then it's likely that 60% of the work of the partnership for non-fee earning work is also in Fareham. Not a perfect system by a long chalk, but when comparison of the past timesheets that sought to capture this on a project by project and activity by activity basis, it was a fairly accurate proxy, and therefore one we believe is far more sensible, rather than wasting a lot of time on administration to pretty much get the same answer. There are obvious reasons why that has flaws. They provide the building control partnership provides different services to different councils, and building name and numbering is obviously one such service. However, it does, we're satisfied, generally wash out in a fair sense. both Gosport and Fareham have identical services provided, a full service provided by the partnership. Portsmouth is different in that we have excluded some specific services: road naming and numbering, access officer for disabled matters, and energy rating services are all excluded from our contract delivery compared to the other two authorities. So on the face of it, that's less activity for the Building Control Partnership in Portsmouth. However, while the partnership provides safety at sports ground services for all three districts and the City Council, there are no in-scope sports grounds in Gosport or Fareham. So while if they happen to build one, they'd pick it up then, and we'd have to look at what that meant to the overall workloads. Currently there's a substantive amount of time and energy put into sports ground safety at Fratton Park. So we do actually sort of more than make up. I think, if I'm honest, we're probably the beneficiaries of this pragmatic split, more than make up for the man hours that we don't get through not having building naming and numbering, access officer and energy rating, because we get substantive more time given to us from the partnership for sports ground safety. So it all comes out in the wash in the end, and from assessment of past timesheets and my own personal experience over the last couple of years, Portsmouth is probably slightly better off in this new system because of that disproportionate amount of time given to the Fratton Park safety issues.
Thank you. I've got the two other questions are slightly different. Well, one is about employment. I had to read this twice to understand exactly the situation, but I gather that we employ our own staff. In other words, and each party employs their own staff. But then they're supervised by the person who leads the service for Fareham Borough Council. And I wondered if there shouldn't have been something in there about recruitment. Who makes decisions to recruit? Would it be possible for one of the partners to recruit people who are not properly qualified for the needs of the whole service? And I would have expected to see something in here about recruitment and about employment. It's always very confusing for people to be supervised by one party and paid by another, and I think there are certain risks in that. And I felt that wasn't clear enough in this document.
Apologies, the sound is so poor I barely heard that. I'm now catching up on the webcast, so I'm running a few minutes behind you. I believe the question that you're asking was predicated, and this was the piece I missed because the sound cut out, on the suggestion that individual authorities are undertaking recruitment. Is that correct?
Well, there's no guidance at all about recruitment and how that would be a shared function.
Thank you. So you're quite right, it is something we put into this report. So to be absolutely clear, currently, and under this new agreement, because it wouldn't change, all recruitment and all staffing is carried out by Fareham Borough Council as the employing authority. So we supervise the overall delivery of the work in accordance with the MOU. It's an appendix to the report, but all recruitment matters are undertaken by Fareham Borough Council. To ensure that, the other point you made, that staff aren't biasly recruited to support needs that we as a broader partnership, or indeed Portsmouth City Council within it, are looking to achieve, the steering group, the board of the partnership made up of the responsible officers of the three authorities, regularly talk about training and recruitment needs and discuss the overall needs and direction of recruitment. Obviously, we're not involved in the individual recruitment activities. That's carried out by the Business Control Partnership Management Team, supported by Fairham's own HR department. But we are fully briefed on a regular basis on staffing issues, both retention, recruitment and training, to ensure that they are meeting the needs of the Building Control Partnership, the Building Act and associated regulations, and of course Portsmouth City Council as a contributing authority.
Thank you. I mean, that's what I hoped you'd say, but in fact I don't think that this set of documents say that. It might be necessary for somebody to go through and make sure that, for example, a further evidence of something that I think is a bit less clear than it should be is on page 24. It says employees will continue to be paid by their employer. and it's not clear there who that is. And I believe later on there's also somewhere where that's not clear. So perhaps that could be checked at some point. I'd be grateful. Now, just two other points that are slightly more general. This document purports to be about updating the agreements. I know that if I use the term the disabled in any other context, I would be held up by the disabled lobby. It's not how we speak about people who rely on, for example, wheelchairs anymore. And second of all, although I think when the document was drawn up it would have been an acceptable terminology, so that's mentioned twice in here. But second of all, and more importantly, I think that the document could be greened a little bit. Quite a lot of the job of the building regulations is to check for the standards, the new standards, national standards for environmental, reducing energy use and improving the thermal qualities of buildings. And I don't see that in here at all. It is implied, but I think it might have been better if the document had been updated in one or two places, just to make that part of the objectives of the service within the law, of course, and just to have updated that very slightly, particularly when we come to recruiting people and they look at this document. It would be something that if I was a green building surveyor, would want to see there in order to attract me to the job.
Through you, Councillor Mason, with apologies, the sound is, I think, almost effectively impossible for me to provide a full support to this meeting. I believe that the concern, and apologies, Councillor Smythe, was that the document is perhaps slightly light in certain detail around certain aspects of what the building surveyors do on behalf of the Building Control Partnership. We can certainly look at whether additional wording can be applied to the document through the delegated authority that this report seeks. However, and I believe I heard you say that you did agree at least that these matters were implied, if not expressly stated. This document obviously is a tripartite document and has already been executed by Fareham and Gosport, so consequently any changes, even small technical changes, will be quite difficult to achieve. I can say, give you my personal reassurance, that obviously it is a well-trodden area of public regulation, and all appropriate surveyors and all appropriate users of the service are fully aware of the obligations and the details of all forms of the building regulations, and nothing has been excluded through this document. We are satisfied, having checked it both professionally, myself and the building control manager, and by the council's own legal services.
I know it's very difficult for you, and thank you for joining remotely, but I didn't actually in any way imply that this document should be longer. In fact, I think probably it could be quite a lot shorter. But I do wonder if referring to people as the disabled is something we ought to be doing anymore. And I think that there has been a raft of legislation that affects this job that probably isn't. And I certainly don't want a full job description, because it is something that's constantly changing with legislation. But in fact, the obligations of building regulations people to look at environmental matters is now much greater through legislation. It's completely not mentioned. But I take your point about it having been agreed in other places. But I think the document could actually have been quite a lot shorter and clearer as well.
From the Chair, I think the way to handle both of those matters, the question of the terminology concerning people who have disabilities, and that concerning environmental matters, could be brought to a future meeting of the Building Control Partnership as something which could be put in as an amendment, suggested as an amendment. It would need, obviously, to go the bounds of the three councils, but I think it is worth bringing those matters to the attention of the Building Control Partnership. Would you agree, Ian?
So yes, I think that's a very sensible solution. I'm trying to recall whether the use of the word disabled, which obviously appears in the term access officer for the disabled, is a regulatory defined term. I quite agree, not a term that we generally use in normal parlance, and I would happily agree not an optimal term, but it may well be there because it is defined as such within the regulations. We can obviously check that. Just a comment on a broader point linked to that as well, that while yes, Councillor Smythe is quite correct, there's a number of different changing obligations on the building control system, building safety arising from the Grenfell disaster being a key issue. Many of these haven't yet been embedded in law, so it is inevitable. I think we will need to do some form of addendum and update to the MOU, if not the Charter, as the legislation changes, which is expected to happen probably in early 2023. So there will be certainly a need to bring these documents back for regular administrative updates through the partnership, which obviously we can pick up these other issues as well as and when those updates are needed in 2022.
Thank you.
I think, thank you, that's fine. I think the place that would be appropriate for a small amendment is the Memorandum of Understanding, where there's a purpose statement, and I'm very glad to see that purpose statement, but that purpose statement doesn't directly link to the law and changes in the law, and there would be a place there where it's our text, not text to do with the law, to make a very small amendment. It does say there an accessible, safe, sustainable and healthy environment, which I think is fine, but I think we now go a little bit further than that when we are trying to also create an environment where we're moving towards carbon reduction. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I think I agree with everything that's already been said, and the document I would agree with as well. I've just got 3 questions, really. So obviously one was on the reserve amount currently being 332,000, and we want to reduce that so the initial sum will be 150,000. It's just where or what are we going to do with the 182,000? And potentially that's a naive question, but I just think important to understand where that's going to go. I'll ask all 3 questions. That's probably the easiest way for Ian to respond. The second question is about the dispersal of potential funds.
Apologies for interrupting. It would be a lot easier if I could answer them individually.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no problem.
And apologies, I'll have to summarise the questions as I go. I believe, how is the 182,000 being spent was the first question.
Yes.
Yeah, so a number of different projects have been approved by the board. The largest 2 projects, both at around £60,000, are a substantive back scanning project. There's a lot of hard copy and microfiche records that must be held for a prolonged period of time of past approvals. That we're hoping actually will come in below the 60,000 estimate, but 60,000 of that 180 has been put aside for that, and is I think we're about 2/3, 3/4 of the way through that project already. Another £60,000 has been earmarked for office improvements. The main offices for the Building Control Partnership are in Fairham's depot. Obviously, there is a question around how much of that will be paid directly by Fairham as the landlord, and how much by the partnership as tenants. But say another £60,000 put aside for that purpose. A further £10,000 has been put aside, and I think now fully spent, on an upgrade to the Building Control Partnership website to make it easier for users to access those services. That money was actually spent in Portsmouth City Council. Portsmouth City Council's IT department was commissioned to do that work, so that 10,000 was spent there. And the remaining 50 or so thousand, and indeed any underspends of those other projects, is being held as a training reserve, as mentioned briefly earlier, there is substantive changes on the horizon through the Building Act, which is, I think, still a bill, which is looking to become enacted in 2023, which requires a root and branch overhaul, to be blunt, of building control services, and it will require us to take every single one of our surveyors through a re-accreditation and training process, which obviously has substantive costs. So the other 50,000 is being held as a reserve to deliver that training costs during 2022 into 2023. It's anticipated that this requirement will be fully up and running by October 2023. So we've got around 18 months to deliver that, and we expect to get through that £50,000 on that training purposes.
Thank you, Ian. So the second question I've got is about the dispersal of funds. Is the dispersal of funds based on the size of the local authority, or is it based on the workload that each local authority undertakes, is the question. So obviously, coming as Portsmouth City Councillors, and I'm fully supportive of joint working across authorities, I just want to ensure that we're getting our, shall we say, fair percentage to be accrued.
So, apologies, I didn't got part of that question, but the dispersal of funds is made on an identical model as the contributions made. So it is based on using the fee-earning work, which obviously is geographically based, as a proxy for that. So we have a fair proportion as a percentage of those funds. The Building Control Partnership, I would just say, has put together and does regularly every quarter an update of the surplus position, the project position, and the recharge and surplus distributions. This is due to be presented to members, I believe, this week or next week. And once that's been done with the portfolio holders' consent, I'm more than happy to share that with members, so you can see the breakdown directly from Farehams Accountancy Services that provide you with full details of that.
Thank you. And last question, Chair. So it's a very, very generic question, but what are the risks of these changes to Portsmouth City Council within this document, or are there no risks is just the question. So it's just a response about potential risks that arise based on this change.
Certainly. So the potential risks, obviously the most significant risk of whether we sign this document or not is the ability of the partnership to continue. Until the document is signed, we are effectively operating under a nearly 6-year-old, I think, memorandum, which doesn't properly reflect current legislation. So there's a substantive risk around the authority whereunder the Building Control Partnership is operating if we choose not to sign it. The risk associated with signing is, say, it's moving to a new fee structure, which is dependent on variables outside the control of the authority, i.e. the number of fee-earning activities occur, which will then define our split of the payments we make. Under the modelling we've done, we feel that financial risk is very minimal. It would have to have a substantive change to the amount of work in all 3 boroughs for PCC to be likely to have to pay a greater payment per annum than we currently are into the Business Building Control Partnership. But obviously, if all of a sudden 100% of their activity occurs in Portsmouth and nothing occurs in Fareham and Gosport under this new process, we will be liable for a much larger number than we will be under the old process. However, as I say, under the current process, we are fixed with a liability that under our most likely models is most likely to go down, not up. So this new model is a reduction in our financial exposure to that market rather than a continuation of the current system, which is likely to cost the taxpayer of Portsmouth more effectively, looking to subsidise Gosport and Fareham in a small way. So there are financial risks because we are now linking ourselves to the market rather than a pre-negotiated fee position. But we do feel that not only is that a fairer system, of course, is also one that is a very minimal financial risk to Portsmouth based on the modelling that we've done.
Right, are there any other questions, members? No? Well, in which case, having sorted out the concerns which we had, and I am glad for the way in which they have been brought up. They're important. I'm minded to accept the recommendation set out and to approve it. And so I've signed the document, and that concludes the entertainment for this morning. Thank you very much for your attendance. And thank you very much, Ian, for coming in on the telephone line.